the evidence that he's using to justify his argument, but his basic argument is that language developed consciousness. So people would stand at the side of a river and see a scallop, and then they developed a word for a scallop, and now scallop was in their mind. And then somebody could say, come back later for that scallop. And all of a sudden you start creating actual awareness of time differences. And that's where consciousness came from. And then he has this whole other theory that consciousness sort of developed in the left brain, in the Broca's area, because of language, but then there's a similar part in the right brain that learned language without being tied to consciousness, and people would hear voices through that, and that's where they thought gods were, and that's where like Greek myths come from. And it's an interesting theory. I don't know so much about the second part. Like,
I'd argue that if people stored food or had any kind of later thought, that they had consciousness prior to language, if that happened before language in some way.
I tend to agree.
But once again,
I actually tend to agree.
These are just arguments, right? They're just conversations.
I'm going there with it. I only mentioned the other part because he does a really good job of making the case. I just don't quite think he gets there. Like, there's too many holes for me. But again,
you'd actually have to say that the person was not conscious at the time that they were developing the language. There was no experiential quality to their existence. I think we're just talking about the emergence of higher order concepts,
and so that's what I'm getting at. And Stewart talks about this a lot when he talks about the hedonic consciousness versus the linguistic consciousness. So what I sort of think is that the way James described it is actually a pretty good possibility of where linguistic consciousness came from. Like, that makes sense to me. But I agree with you. I don't think it can just manifest because all of a sudden we're talking. It has to come from something. And I really do go back to this: consciousness is the fundamental property of the universe.